I want to thank you for taking the time to check out my videos. I'm always looking for new topics, so if you have any to share or any comments, please leave them down below. You're going to see a lot of videos and posts and different articles about the pathway to generational wealth. And I'm a person that likes to ask a lot of questions. So if you have comments or questions below, please fill them in because this is something that I'm interested in. My question is, I want to know, I will add some questions about the pathway to generational wealth. And for those of you who are listening, I want to work backwards. When we hear pathway to generational wealth, let's start with the wealth and work our way backwards from wealth generation to pathway. Let's start with the wealth portion first. Now, you probably heard this word thrown around a lot, but Merriam-Webster defines wealth as an abundance of valuable material possessions or resources. That means assets, that means riches, that means capital, just stocks, money, things of that nature. Which brings me to my first question. What is the perspective of wealth? Meaning, how do you define wealth? Because wealth may mean different things to different people based on their experiences. And more importantly, how do you change that perspective? Let me give you an example. I grew up in a single parent household. My mom, in my opinion, was the wealthiest person I knew. She was a teacher. I never seen her complain about anything, and she did everything that she wanted to do. So my view of wealth was viewed through the lens of what she did, working for the county as a teacher, working as for a certain number of years, making a certain dollar amount, which I was aware of. I don't think she knew I was aware of, but I was aware of. So that was my lens point in terms of wealth. The reality is that it wasn't until I went to college and it got exposed to other classmates whose families had varying levels of wealth that I realized that wealth was different. And so that brings me to the point of asking the question, how do you define wealth, and how, more importantly, can you help somebody, or should you help somebody, change their perspective about what they view as wealth? Because that perspective may be too low, or it may be too high, or it just may be unrealistic. The reason why I say that is because if you don't know what wealth truly is, in terms of how you defining that wealth, you're going to be relegated to your own interpretation based on your experiences. And by doing that, you may inadvertently reduce the level of expectation you have in terms of the wealth that you should be trying to attain. The next part I'm talking about is generational. And when I say generational, I'm saying when we're talking about acquiring generational wealth, shouldn't all the generations be involved? A lot of times we hear people talk about passing on knowledge and so forth. And let's be clear, when we're looking at people in the top 1%, they're passing on their knowledge in order for their next generations to continue to maintain that wealth. But shouldn't we also be talking, especially for those people who are not in that category, about passing it down and passing it up? And you're like, what do you mean by passing it up? Meaning, how many of you out there are in a better, in terms of a wealth situation or asset situation, better than your parents? Meaning, maybe you've attained a level of professionalism, you've attained a level of wealth, you've attained a level of assets that your parents could only dream of. And therefore, they don't necessarily know what you know, so that you have a responsibility to share that knowledge with them. Not only so that they can benefit from it, but understanding what their role is in passing on whatever wealth is going to be passed on to the next generation. How many times, and I was talking to one of my friends about this, how many times have we had loved ones who don't realize that they have assets that they should hold on to if they intend on passing them down to the next generation? And it doesn't have to be just straight cash or stocks. It could be antiquities, and you're like, antiquities, antiques, things that if you check them and they were of value and appraised, they could be a lot of money. Or maybe it's some property that they had that they're like, I'm not even worried about it. Well, you should worry about it. I said, the number of people that I've met who've had family members that I've talked to who've had properties that they just, we've got it, but it's no big deal. No, investigate that. And then more importantly, are you sharing that information with the next generation coming up? Meaning, are they learning from the lessons that you're learning? So when you're talking about generational, are we talking about the past in terms of our grandparents or who are still living, or our parents who are still living, and asking the question, what are you leaving behind? The present generation, like mine, what are you accruing? What are you accumulating? And then the next generation, what are you trying to attain? Which brings me to my last question. Pathway. What truly is the pathway? And it was funny because I was talking to my buddy about this last night and I thought about it more and more. For some people, pathway may be education. And that could be maybe college, grad school, medical school, law school, dental school, whatever the case may be. For others, it may be trade school, acquiring a skill, utilizing that school, going to an apprenticeship program, things of that nature. For some, it may be an opportunity. That opportunity may be going into the military or going into government service, which gives you access to a lot of extra programs that are not readily available to the masses. It could be participating in a family business where you transition from high school into working for the family. But for the persons who don't fall into those three neat categories, or as one of my buddies said, for those people who just got to go straight to work, what is their pathway? How do you help someone how do you help a person transition from a pathway from minimum wage jobs to temp work, from minimum wage jobs or temp work or part-time work to wealth? How do you transition someone who's used to doing all their financial transactions with check cashing in place to wealth? How do you help those people make those transitions? I'm asking all these questions not because I'm trying to spark this major revolution. It's just that sometimes when people throw out these phrases about pathways to generational wealth, and we throw out different things about what you should do. Oh, you should get assets here. You need to get this here. You need to do this here. I often wonder, should we talk more about generational wealth from a definition standpoint, just defining what wealth is, a collaborative standpoint, meaning explaining to everyone that in order for generational wealth to be passed, all generations have to be involved. It just can't be just one. You all have to understand your role in that. And then 3, wealth, defining what is actually the wealth that is being accumulated. So understanding what is the pathway to get you from point A to point B and how you can do it from your existence. That's the thing that really catches my attention. Understanding generationally, collaboratively, how we all need to work together to do this, and then defining what it is to be wealthy so that you can have something clearly defined that you can look at and something clearly defined that you can hopefully create, or with the assistance of others, create a pathway that gets you there in a manner that's reasonable and can work best for you.